We're going to continue our sermon series. This is actually the last sermon series in our sermon series called Living Room, which is all around the big idea of community, that we wanted to place the theological, the practical ideas of community in front of you over the last 3 weeks, and then this is the final fourth week, so that you could believe that God has good things for you in community spaces, believe that God has something exciting for you into this next fall, and that you can maybe step into a greater level of community in this next season. And so I'm excited to continue that. One of the things when I was preparing for this message was I was reminded about something really random, which is connected to this book. Anybody know this book, Worst Case Scenarios, or The Game? That it came out in the 90s. I was born in 1990, so I played this game with my family. Anybody else play this game where you draw a card and it's like, what do you do when a shark attacks? Or like, what do you do when there's a tornado? There's like all of these like different various scenarios that happen or could happen. Some of them are fictional, like, I don't know what your belief about aliens, but like aliens invading, like what do you do? Or zombie apocalypse, or what do you do? Whatever. But I grew up in a family with incredible parents that were not really like drawn to catastrophe or like pessimism. We kind of lived an adventurous life. We went to different countries. We followed the Spirit into different places. And I honestly just think they wanted us to have some fun and but also kind of be wise about all the things that could happen in the world. And so we actually played this game pretty regularly with my family. I remember like thinking, oh, this is kind of fun. My parents would teach us if we're on an airplane, count the numbers of rows between you and an exit. Do you know why you do that? So if there's an emergency landing and you don't have any vision, you know how to get to the exit without having to see. It's a pretty good piece of information. Or if a shark attacks you, punch it in the nose, but really you go for the gills. That's where you go. That's put your hands in its gills. It's very sensitive in there. Or everyone knows what happens if you get stung by a jellyfish. We don't need to talk about it on stage, but if you have a good friend, you're in need in that moment. My parents did all kinds of things like that just to give us some kind of safety or survival techniques in this world. And it could have been anything that we would have maybe never experienced, or maybe really practical things like how to walk on a dark street in a city at night. I remember my dad being like, this is how you walk in a city. Look like you're going somewhere on purpose. Make sure that people think there's someone looking for you, like you're going to a place. You know what I mean? All of these kind of really practical things. And I was so thankful for those things. I'm so thankful for the simple, the silly, the practical, some of the things that I'll never interact with, and some of the things I regularly interact with. But I think the thing that my parents offered me and my sisters, I have two sisters, I'm the youngest, the most beneficial, beyond just a life in Jesus that has brought us such incredible life, the best survival technique that they've ever given us in our life was life in community. Was a deep, deep experience of community. From before I was born, my parents and my family have lived in community, lived in all varieties of kinds of community, have led communities, have been in communities, I've not known a different way than living in an experience of a depth of a community. And it's not just because they thought that was a good idea, but it's actually, if you look at Genesis 2, it's the survival technique of humanity. Jesus, in the creation order, Yahweh says, it's not good for humanity to be alone. It's not good for you to be alone. I'm going to create community. And we know this not just on a theological basis, but on a personal basis. We know the experience of loneliness. We know the grief of being in a city and feeling like there's not a single person who knows me. To being so isolated that birthdays go by and nobody celebrates them. Or loss happens in your life and there's no one to share it with. Research now is connecting the sense of loneliness to physical health. That those who are dealing with a severe sense of loneliness actually is leading to early death. And it's not just suicide, but it's the inner workings of our physical body need the connection of another person. Isn't that amazing that it's not just like a good thought that we find in Genesis, but God has designed you, your physical being, to be in community. And research is only showing that as we're becoming more and more digitally connected, we're becoming more and more disparate and more unconnected in actual relationships. That the rise of loneliness is only increasing. There was research before COVID, and I'm sure that it's only increased during that season, that over 50% of people only had one good, close friend that they could share a significant life event with. And over 25% of people had zero. That something significant, good or bad, would come through their life, and they would have nowhere to take it. Community is the answer for that. Is the journey towards that. It's the prescription for that. So we're going to continue our conversation. We're going to look at the life and words of Paul that we find in Romans 12. Caroline 2 weeks ago preached on the passage just before this. And so you feel free to turn to Romans 12. It's going to be on the screen. Yeah, hold on one second. Let me get my notes in order. There you go. So this is what it says in Romans 12. And remember, the context, Justin talked about this on our first week, the context of actually the entire Bible, and especially the New Testament, is an understanding of living in community. And so often we read it as individuals, and that's not how it's meant to be read. It's meant to be read in community and understood in community. And so this, again, is a letter to a group of new believers living in Rome, trying to figure it out, being a group of different house churches, trying to figure out what it looks like to follow Jesus far, far away from the center of the Christian experience in Jerusalem, and trying to figure out what does it look like to follow Jesus now. And Paul is trying to send them some encouragement, send them some direction, send them the way of Jesus. And so this is what it says. It says, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourself. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor. Serving the Lord, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with the people of lower position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. That seems pretty impossible. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. That seems impossible too. Do not take revenge. My dear friends, leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, mine is vengeance. Mine is to avenge, to repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, this is what Jesus is teaching about that. It says, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. By doing this, you will heap coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Again, this is speaking, Paul is writing to communities that are trying to live in a community, in a wider culture that doesn't look like them. That even in themselves, they're having conflict to try and figure it out. Does that sound anywhat similar to the church today? That we are trying to be a people that is different than the culture around us, and even on our inside, at times we don't see each other. And so when we're talking about community, when we're talking about this big idea, it can feel lofty. It can feel elusive. It can feel complicated, because often reality is that community can look a lot of different ways. It's looked a lot of different ways for me. There's not really a one-size-fits-all reality for community, and I hope over the last 4 weeks you haven't heard any of us kind of present an idea that we've got the idea, let's just get into our little box and all of your problems will be solved. There's not a one-size-fits-all reality for community, but the reality is that community is for all. And so we have to somehow hold that tension that there isn't a one-size-fits-all community, but for all, we have to be in community, which really puts the emphasis on you figuring it out. I'm sorry about that. So, like I said, communities looked a lot different ways for me. Let me just give you a couple of examples. As an 18-year-old, I lived in a house, like a shared living house with 6 other guys, and we did mission, and we did ministry, and we worked together, and we ate together, and we did daily rhythms of prayer together, and we lived in this kind of like harmonious, amazing period of time, but it was for 12 months, and then we all dispersed across the world. As a 14-year-old, my parents moved from the UK to the US, and instead of just doing that as our little nuclear family, they brought 3 other families with us because they believed that moving as a community was the best way to do mission. I've lived in a multi-generational communities that are trying to change the world by the way that they live in a particular area through daily rhythms, monthly rhythms, yearly rhythms of Sabbath, of disciplines, of fasting, but have got all the complications of having it with a 2-year-old to a 7-year-old. I've lived here in Atlanta with a large house church of 20-somethings that all have a lot of time and a lot of zeal for Jesus and have just said, let's just give it all. Let's do as much as we can for Jesus in as much time as we can, blessing one another and blessing those around us. I've lived in other seasons when I've had kids and I haven't had as much energy. And what community has looked like is a few couples that we've committed to and said, we'll take care of one another. We're trying to figure this thing out. So the best thing that we can do is share meals together, because meal times are chaos when you're having kids. So just like the group dynamic kind of makes your kids settle down or go more crazy, but you just feel better because other people are there. In that same season, we were sharing date nights with other couples where we would say, give us your kids so you can go be alone. That's what community looked like in that season. All of that has been a reflection of what I needed in different seasons. What I can tell you is that you need community. What I can't tell you is how you should find it. By the end of this, I will give you a clear opportunity to jump into house church, the way that we organize community here. And again, it is not because we believe that house church is God-sent and the only way to do it. We have just found over the last 15 years that it's a simple yet flexible enough model to hold a lot of different varieties of needs. And we believe in this kind of urban environment, and through our church, we can kind of organize people into little house churches, and they will have a really deep experience of community, and that's amazing. And so to speak about community, it's important just to delineate between prescription and description. Again, what I'm saying is the prescription from God is that you need community. What I'm going to do the best I can is to describe some key ingredients for a Jesus-centered community that are broad enough that we would be able to hold a lot of different experiences, but specific enough for us to be like, okay, this next week, I'm going to go towards one of those things. Does that make sense? All right. So, what are those ingredients? I would say the 2 key ingredients, if you are looking for a Jesus-centered community, are commitment and consistency. Commitment and consistency. Commitment and consistency. And what do I mean by those two things? So let me talk about commitment. I'll talk about them individually. What do I mean by commitment? Commitment, a relationship based on commitment is not a relationship based on connection or chemistry. And actually, connection and chemistry are great. They're just weak bindings for a relationship. They're great starters. They're actually awesome. Connection, it's defined by looking at another person in a similar season and being like, oh, we must have all right, we could probably hang out. All right, that seems good. That's a good connection. Chemistry, defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is like an interaction between two people that is highly emotional and even psychological experience between two people. Have you ever had that moment where you're like, are we in love? I already have a wife, but are we in love? Like, this is amazing. You're an amazing person. I think I need to hang out with you a little more. Maybe it's actually something that you're like, we haven't got anything in common, but I need you and you need me, and whew, this is sparks fly. You know? That's great. Have those moments, but the reality is that those moments are short-lived. They're amazing, actually, opportunities to jump into community, but the reality is we know this from a marriage. From the picture of a marriage is that a marriage can't be based on connection and chemistry. Because as soon as somebody changes, as environments change around you, if preferences change, all of those things begin to get very shaky foundations. What's much better is a marriage based on commitment. That as circumstances change, you say, hey, it's ride or die, we're together. We'll figure this thing out. You're committed to me, I'm committed to you, let's do this thing. The thing also about connection and chemistry is that you can actually manufacture them. We know this from online connection. It's manufactured. You're just looking at people. Your algorithm is creating similarities for you to be like, there's people out there in the world who look just like me, who love lacrosse and climbing and soccer, and there's a small little demographic that if I look on the internet, I'm just like everybody else. It's amazing. And even chemistry, if you create an environment enough, it'll feel emotional enough and chemistry will start happening. But what you can't manufacture is commitment. You cannot manufacture commitment because it's two people saying yes to an agreement. It's a community saying, we'll just do it together. I don't know, we're not perfect. It's fine. Let's just go for the journey. So what does commitment look like in a Jesus-centered community? What does commitment look like in these communities that Paul is talking to? I think the two things that are necessary when we think about commitment in a Jesus-centered community, there's two things that we need to be committed to, and they're so obvious, yet we're so easy to distract ourselves with other things and not do them, which is commitment to Jesus and to one another. If there is a community that is centered on a commitment to Jesus and to one another, I promise you it'll be a fruitful community. What does it look like to be centered with a commitment to Jesus? You can pull up those verses. Actually, let's read the message one. Thank you. I think there's another message one first. Is there a 9? Is there message? There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Awesome. Let me read this. This is Romans, the same passage what we had, but through the Message translation, which I just love. I often talk about this on a wedding day. So if I've ever done your wedding, I may have even done these verses. So here we go. So this is what it says. It says, love from the center of who you are. Don't fake it. Run for dear life from evil. Hold on for dear life to good. Be good friends who love deeply. Practice playing the second fiddle. This is what it looks like to be committed to Jesus. Don't burn out. Keep yourselves fueled and aflame. Be alert servants of the Master, cheerfully expectant. Don't quit in hard times. Pray all the harder. Help needy Christians. Be inventive in hospitality. Bless your enemies. Don't curse under your breath. Laugh with your happy friends when they're happy. Share tears when they're down. Get along with each other. Don't be stuck up. Make friends with nobodies. Don't be the great somebody. Don't hit back. Discover beauty in everyone. If you've got it in you, get along with everyone. Don't insist on getting even. That's not for you to do. I'll do the judging, says God. I'll take care of it. Our scriptures tell us that if you see your enemy hungry, go buy that person a lunch. If he's thirsty, get him a drink. Your generosity will surprise him with goodness. Don't let evil get the best of you. Get the best of evil by doing good. Isn't that so good? So good. Thank you, Eugene Peterson. But that idea, you can put up the first slide that has so don't burn out. Keep yourselves fueled and aflamed. That's what I would say, is that if there's a community that is placing Jesus in the center, that's what we're looking for, is that we are consistently coming back to our source, believing that our community is from God, through God, and for God. That everything that is coming in that community is an opportunity for grace, opportunity for giving, opportunity for generosity from the Father. I think about that James passage that says, every good thing that we find in our life has come down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not shift or change like a passing shadow. That you can find the things that are good in your community, identify them as God sources. It's so easy. When you find something good in your community, just say, that's from God. That means you're committing yourself to Jesus being in the center. What does it look like to commit yourself to one another? That idea of one anothering. Maybe you've heard that in growing up in church, that idea of one anothering, which is simply just preferring other people. I think about when Jesus said in John, that you will be known by your love for one another. What kind of love is that? You see a little bit later in John, he says, there's no greater love than this, than the one who lays down his life for a friend. A commitment to one another, the journey towards that is giving up things, giving up time, effort, opportunity so that you can prefer another person. Playing the second fiddle, I love that. Be good friends who deeply love. All right, let me keep moving. So the two ingredients, one is commitment. The second one is consistency. It's good to be committed, but it's good to be committed on a regular basis. It's the commitment and consistency are these kind of partnerships. It's almost like, not entirely, but it's almost like commitment is the internal yes that you make in a community. And the consistency is your external living out of that. The kind of rhythmic continuality of like, oh yeah, I'm committed because remember I showed up for the last year. I'm committed because every time that there's a birthday, I show up to that party. That's what consistency looks like. And this is where maybe I often call them like the predictable patterns of a community. That's what a consistency is that if you look at your community, is there something that's predictable about it? The ways that it meets, the ways that it organizes itself, the ways that it relates to one another, is there something that's predictable? Because if there's not, actually, it may not be community. It might just be a random occurrence of events that keep on kind of stringing together. Because actually, what is necessary in community and this idea of consistency is intention. So often we just want to be on the passive receiving reality of our life, and especially in community. But what I'm saying in this is that we actually have to put a little bit of intentionality to our life. Community is a grace. It is a complete grace, and it's a grace from God. And that we can't actually conjure it up, but what you can do, I think about Dallas Willard's quote on this, is that grace is opposed to earning, but not effort. Anything that is a grace in your life has been a gift. But that doesn't mean that you have to idly pass by and just assume that you need to passively receive it. Often, the grace and the gifts in our life that God is placing in, you need to walk towards them, cultivate them, nurture them, just like they are a seed that's going in a ground. Community is just like that. It's just like that. But when I start thinking about these predictable patterns, often people begin to have like a very clear vision of what they want their community to look like. And I get that. I'm just like that. I'm a visionary person. I'm a person who wants my way. I'm often the loudest voice in a room, so I often get my way. I'm the guy with the microphone right now. You know, it's like... That's what I want that. But when I was doing research for this sermon, I went to one of the most kind of classic places on theological teaching of this, which is Life Together by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And there's this amazing quote that is well known, but I want to place it up here. And it's a little bit like abrasive at first, so just receive it as it is, and then we'll talk about it, okay? But I think it's so true. It says, every human wish and dream that is injected, that word is important, injected into the Christian community is a hindrance to genuine community and must be banished, banished if genuine community is to survive. He who loves his dream of community more than the Christian community itself becomes a destroyer of the latter. Whoa. Even though his personal intentions may be ever so honest, earnest, and even sacrificial. What is Bonhoeffer saying there? He's saying that if we try and get something out of community or force our way into community, what often happens is that the thing begins to ravel and not be the thing what it's meant to be. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't bring intention. What I'm saying is that don't just assume you're going to get your way. And the ways that the community should be formed and flourished should come out of the community, not be injected into the community. So for seasons of my life, like I said, different varieties of community have been the same, have been various, but the community has still been the same. That we've found, what does our community want to express itself now? How do we want to renew our commitment to Jesus and to one another in this next season? Not assuming that what was will continue to be the best way for us. What we need to imagine is that God is, I think about Matt Reynolds, a previous lead pastor, he always said this. He said, every resource a community needs is within itself. It's already been placed by the Father in the community. That's what it looks like to be the body of Christ. And so we just have to find it. We just have to find the journey. We just have to find the pattern. We have to find the way that the community is meant to be formed. What we need to know is that we shouldn't, this is a big word, but objectify the community. Stand on the outside and believe, I want to get this thing out. but arrive on the inside and say, I'm mutually receiving everything that the God has for us here. That's a different kind of way. That's a different kind of showing up. That's a different kind of consistency. That's a different kind of commitment. So just in our couple last minutes, let me just think about this idea of what would a consistency look like in a community. And there's two kind of frameworks for us to think about in this. And one will be obvious for some and one will be the obvious for the others. But I think we need both. Consistency in the organized and consistency in the organic. And some of you are like, don't ever organize me, ever. Let me just love my friends. And some of me are like, if it's not on my calendar, I don't know what you're talking about. And we need both in a community. What we see, I believe, 2 times, or I think Justin used Acts 2 for both of his sermons, which is kind of cheating, I think. But Acts, it's very efficient. He just did one sermon, just a really long one. He cut it in half. But in that passage, what we see is Acts 2:42 through 47 is that they were committed to themselves in really organized ways. That they met each other. It says every day they went to the temple. Every day they went and broke bread together. That there was an organization of the way that they even distributed food, we find out later in Acts. That there's an organization to that thing, that people could be like, oh yeah, look, the Church of Jesus are meeting over there. That's right now. It's happening. But there's also a natural service, an organic reality. I love what they said is that the signs and wonders kind of emerged out of that community. You know what you can't do with signs and wonders? Organize them. That's when somebody is in need and you come and you reach a hand, because it's the organic reaction that you have in community. It's the consistent pattern that you've created, is that when there's somebody in need in our life, that you bring them out of the pit. Not in an organized way, but, oh, my buddy just called me because he's in need and he's got a tire on the freeway. It's not because I can't come. I'm coming now. It is a reaction. It's a consistency that I have to move towards my community. Oh, I'm sorry it's not on house church night. I don't want to bother you. I mean, and this is really hard for us. I have a friend that we were in the first house church together here in Grace Midtown. And I just sent them to North Carolina. Not Ryan, another friend. I'm obviously looking for a new friend. I'm not, actually not. I've got great friends. But this friend of 10 years, 10 years, we've had, been in each other's homes unknown amount of times. And even still, he felt that awkwardness to be like, hey, man, I need a little bit of help packing the truck. Like, you don't have to. But of course, it is a consistent pattern in my life to move towards him and be like, yeah, dude, whenever you want it. Let's do this thing. That's not an organization. That's because we have years of a pattern of loving one another in every area of our life. Finally, I think about this, when me and Taylor were early married, there was this amazing older couple that would kind of just take us under our wings as we didn't know what we were doing. Under their wings, not under our wings. Under their wings as we didn't know what they were doing. We would gather every Wednesday night, and we would eat dinner with their kids. They would put their kids to bed, and we would talk, and we would watch shows together. We did it for years. Wednesday nights, that's what we did. We went to them. Sometimes more people were going to be there, but always we were going to be there. That was an organization. That was a consistent pattern, a predictable reality of my life. It actually made my week better, knowing Wednesday nights, I'm going over to Courtney and David's house. But also, they were the people that on a Saturday afternoon after we got our little dog that we were so excited about, we showed up to their house and we were like, look at our brand new baby. He's so cute. And what do you think? They were like, no, it's not Wednesday nights. Please come back in a couple days. Don't bring your dog here as well. No, they embraced us. And when we were having some of our hardest marriage moments in those first few early years, and we couldn't get to the bottom of the conflict, and we were driving to Courtney's and David's house, and we hadn't even texted them that we were coming yet, but because we were fighting so much, and we were like, get over to this, just get to their house, they'll help us. We're like, help! We need help! And what do you think they did? They're like, no. Wednesday nights, please, come back on Wednesday. No, they opened their door and like, you guys, what are you doing? Come in. Because we had a pattern of consistently loving one another. Does this make sense? Here's the thing that binds those two realities together. So the idea of commitment and consistency, honestly, it's just sacrifice. It's just sacrifice. I think of my mom in a kitchen I can't even tell you how many people. She just says, I'm really sorry, you're probably just going to have to die to yourself. Most of life is about sacrifice. And she's like the kindest, sweetest person. But she just knew the way of Jesus. That death to self was the journey towards resurrection. That to surrender in community and say, I don't want my goals met. I don't want my needs met. I just want to be a part of the thing that Jesus is doing in this world. And I'm probably just going to have to give up some stuff. I'm probably just going to have to let go of the things that I want, desire, need, any of those things. Because there's no greater love than this, than the one that lays down his life for a friend. Jesus told us, we just don't want to embrace it. He said, you will be known by my love. You will be known by your love for one another. And the kind of love is sacrificial love. And that sacrificial love should be expressed through commitment and consistency. That's the basis of community. I'm going to talk about a little bit of the practical steps of journeying together, but I'm going to invite the band up and we'll just wrap this thing. Here's the thing. I understand that community can be a hard reality for some. That some people, most likely, the biggest pains in your life have been done by people who are closest to you. Those who have been the ones who are meant to care for you, wounded you. Those ones who were meant to provide for you felt like they destroyed you. The ones who are closest to love you pained you. But that doesn't mean that we have to walk away and believe that thing is going to happen again. Just like Justin said, we cannot promise safety, but we can believe that God is going to meet you in community. And so what I would encourage you to do is when you think about yourself, where you find yourself in your life right now, you'll be on a spectrum of community. Anywhere from, I don't have a friend in Atlanta, to I'm ready to go be a part of the Monastery of the Holy Spirit in a planned community out in Conyers. I don't think anybody's there, but that's probably the furthest end of community. A lifelong commitment to a group of people in a cloister. That's probably not anyone. But we'll find ourselves somewhere along that journey, right? Now, all I would ask for you today is to consider what does commitment and consistency towards other people look like. For some, it might be just asking a friend to have a meal at your house. Nobody's ever been to your apartment before, and you just want them to come over. Maybe some of you have been hanging out with some other people that you were hanging out with for a long time, and you just need to kind of define that relationship of like, are we doing this thing? Are we guys committed to each other? Are we ride or die? Are we in? It's that awkward conversation, but if you don't have that conversation, you'll just be in that kind of no man's land for a while. Maybe some of you are actually in house church here. What does commitment to Jesus look like afresh? What does commitment to one another look like afresh? And what does a consistent pattern of those two things, what would you imagine the community desires it to be? But for some of you, you're just deeply longing to be in a community. And I don't want to miss the opportunity for us to say, again, we don't have the perfect solution, but we do have house church. We do. I deeply believe in it. I've lived it for a long time. And so if you want house church, I could not encourage you to do anything else than just sign up for Encounter House Church and just go on the adventure. You might make some friends for 6 months. You might meet your spouse. You might meet your best friends for as long as you're in Atlanta and somewhere in between. But what I can encourage you is that however long you're in that community, Jesus will be found and you will find a fruitful life in it. All I can encourage you is to go a step deeper towards community this season. Because you know you need it. You know you need it. Because it's the survival plan. It's God's survival plan for us. Jesus, we love you. Be our captain, be our friend, be our provider. We love you so much. In your name we pray. Amen.